none other than the Dunbar High School Jazz Band. Y'all are so awesome. First, let me apologize to all those who are gathered for being a little late. I just came back from from where we have housed the homeless individuals in the city, and just was excited and took a little bit longer to walk through. And Jack, I know you've noticed all of those individuals out there. It's Amnesty Day today and tomorrow in Baltimore. Jack has been asking me about that since I first got here, and it's happening right now. But we're here because we're celebrating, this is our kickoff for Black History Month. And we are also celebrating the 200th birthday in recognition of Frederick Douglass, and we're very excited about that. And I am so excited that we're going to have exhibits. We've got a big kickoff this evening as well. So I want to welcome those who joined us, the Crossroads School, the Dunbar High School Jazz Band. Wanda Draper is here. She's the Executive Director of the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. Joseph Shepard, one of our great artists. James Piper Bond, President and CEO of Living Classrooms. And we're joined by City Council persons Costello and Bullock, and Comptroller Joan Pratt, and our own City Council President Jack Young. We think this is a great opportunity to not only celebrate Black History Month, and many of you have our program that lists all the activities that are going to be going on throughout the month of February, not just for Black History in terms of celebrating Frederick Douglass. Also, it is a time for us to recognize our history. And it's important to know your history because I've always been told if you don't know your history, you don't know where you're going. And so we really need to express and share with you the history of African Americans in this country and in this city. We're also excited about all the exhibits that are taking place. And this 19th century author, Frederick Douglass, if you don't know, I'm talking to the young people specifically, I want you to learn as much as you can about him because he's one of the greatest African Americans that has ever lived in this world. He was the first African American citizen to hold one of the highest U.S. government rankings. He has a Great Blacks in Wax, in the Great Blacks in Wax Museum. There is a statue. The Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture shares with you a lot of the history of this individual. And then the Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Museum and Park also shares with us through the CEO of the Living Classrooms Foundation, the life of Frederick Douglass along with Isaac Myers. In fact, the mayor's office is also hosting a Black History Month exhibition that will be open tonight, so we invite you all back for that as well. But I want to thank all of those who are gathered with us. Mr. Bond and the students from Crossroads, thank you for being here. And again, I want to remind you that there are a lot of great activities. But I'm going to bring to the podium the President of the City Council, Mr. Jack Young, to share a few words with us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You already recognized my colleagues, but I'd like to recognize them again. Councilman Eric Costello, who chairs the Budget Committee, and Chairman John Bullock, who chairs Housing and Urban Affairs Committee. But Madam Mayor, I want to thank you for hosting this kickoff celebration, celebrating Black History Month and the contributions that Frederick Douglass have made to America. Frederick Douglass was taught by one of his white slave owners the alphabets. But young people, listen at this. What he did was secretly, at night, he would teach his own self how to read and how to write. And he became one of the greatest writers of all times. But I just want you to know that Black History Month is not just in February. It's throughout the year because of the great contributions that African Americans have made to this country. So I want you to dream big, because you can be whatever you want to be as long as you keep your eyes on the prize. And again, Madam Mayor, thank you for inviting me, and at this time I'm going to call Comptroller Pratt to have a few words.
Good afternoon, and I would also like to thank Madam Mayor for inviting me to the start of the Black History Month series honoring Frederick Douglass's 200th birthday. This celebration is a great opportunity to highlight the contributions and achievements of African Americans, including those past and present. Black history is American history. It is a rich history of the black men and women who built this great nation into what it is today. Despite prejudice and through dedication and sacrifice, they made a path for us and for future generations. It is our duty and the duty of those who will follow us to learn about Black Americans who made history, who succeeded against all odds, and who laid the foundation for equality with courage, boldness, and true bravery that is often unrecognized. Frederick Douglass said, "The life of the nation is secure only while the nation is honest, truthful, and virtuous." During Black History Month, I hope that we all take the time to educate ourselves on the many accomplishments of African Americans, and that we also learn something new in an effort to maintain the honesty, truth, and virtue of the world that we live in today. Please enjoy this series and learn as much as you can during Black History Month and the months that follow. Thank you very much.
So I have the honor of introducing James Piper Bond. He will give some remarks and introduce students from the Living Classroom, the Crossroads School. The students, I understand that you all are going to share some quotes with us. That's exciting. So, Mr. Bond.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and we're grateful for your leadership and Council President Young and Councilman Costello and Bullock and Controller Pratt. And this is, look, we got a full house here. How about the band? I thought the band was amazing. They were fantastic. And so when we think about Frederick Douglass, and if you wander down to the point of Fells Point, and there's a very historic spot, the oldest industrial building on the Baltimore waterfront, and it's the site of the country's first black-owned shipyard. And in 1866, Frederick Douglass, this is the year right after the Civil War, Frederick Douglass mentored 15 of the most prominent African Americans in Baltimore, led by Isaac Myers, and they came together, they raised $10,000 of capital, and they started the first black-owned shipyard in the country, right there at that spot. And so we honor that every day, not just in this historic year of Frederick Douglass' 200th anniversary, but we welcome everyone to come to the Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Park. We have a little museum on the second floor, and I'm really excited that the Crossroads students have been working all year on an exhibit, and there'll be a new art show up on the third floor of their artwork, all about Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass grew up as a boy in Baltimore from the age of 8 to about 20, and he worked as a caulker in the shipyards. And so he knew Baltimore well. And then as an older man, he came back and he owned 4 homes on Dallas Street, which is right between Caroline and Bond Street. So as an older man, he knew Baltimore well. And he mentored these young entrepreneurs to have this very successful first black-owned shipyard in the country. So we have a bunch of different events happening there. I would like Candy Claggett, who is our director of the museum. She's going to come up and tell you about something special that's happening on the 17th of February that involves everyone, many different institutions in the city, and Visit Baltimore. Candy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. The Maritime Park will be hosting the Visitor Baltimore Legends and Legacies Jubilee on February 17th, celebrating the life of Frederick Douglass. In honor of Black History Month, many of the city's top cultural attractions gather under one roof for an afternoon of free, interactive, and family-friendly activities. Baltimore's Legends and Legacies Jubilee invites everyone to embrace the city's rich African-American heritage and culture while encouraging inclusivity and community engagement. In honor of the 200th anniversary of Frederick Douglass' birth, the Jubilee will be held at the Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Museum.
Thank you,
Thank
Candy.
you.
And I see, thank you, Candy. And I see we have the director of the Maryland Historical Society, Wanda's here. We have many of the different institutions that all make up part of the Baltimore National Heritage Area, which is a city organization that honors a lot of the history, especially the African-American history of our city. And Frederick Douglass, at this site, on the February 24th, we will be hosting Baltimore Black History Tours. And the restaurant, which was a waterfront kitchen restaurant, has now been changed to Emperor's Sea Restaurant. And on February 20th, there will be a Frederick Douglass birthday party so you can come have a special meal where Lamont, who is the new manager there and a graduate of Project Serve, will be helping to serve a beautiful dinner. So that's some of the things we have going on at the Maritime Park. But why don't we have the young men and ladies come up from the Crossroads School, which is the most successful middle school in the city of Baltimore, one of Maryland's first charter schools. Come on up, guys. And so not only have they helped put together an art exhibit, and some of their predecessors about 5-6 years ago actually wrote a book called The Rising Tides of Freedom about Frederick Douglass and Isaac Myers. And the Maryland Historic Society and others have asked to have a reprinting of that book. Mayor, I left one on your desk. I don't know if did you get that book? And it's a beautifully written book. So these young men and women are going to, they've selected a quote that they're going to say, and so I'll just say their name, and why don't you guys come up one at a time, and the first one will be Cleveland Melvin, who's a 6th grader.
How do you do? A smile or a tear that has not nationality. Joy and sorrow speak alike to all nations, and they, above all the confusion of tongues, proclaim the brotherhood of man.
Deanna Frazier is a 7th grade at Crossroads.
If there is no struggle, there is no progress.
Brandon Waller is an 8th grader at Crossroads.
We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and the future.
Alea Cephas, that's a 6th grader.
No man can put a chain about the ankle of his fellow man without at last finding the other end fastened to his own neck.
It's powerful. Ryan Delgado, a 7th grader.
Hello. A great battle lost or won is easily described, understood, and appreciated. But the moral growth of a great nation requires reflection as well as observation to appreciate it.
Nina Locklear, a 6th grader, and the daughter of Travis Street. Come on up.
To suppress free speech is a double wrong. It violates the rights of the hearer as well as those of the speaker. It is just as criminal to rob a man of his right to speak and hear as it would be to rob him of his money.
And in conclusion, we have 2 students who have thought long and hard about what Frederick Douglass means to them and about his 200th birthday. And so Simeon Walker is an 8th grader, and he will also introduce Victoria Trice, an 8th grader.
Good afternoon. Our school is called the Crossroads School, and it is located in the Fells Point area of Baltimore. The location of our school is a big reason behind why we began to research the life of Frederick Douglass. We discovered at least 3 main connections between Frederick Douglass and the Fells Point area. The first connection was that Frederick was forced to work for a man named Hugh Auld. Auld's house was located in the Fells Point area. Prior to working for Auld, Frederick had started out his life as the son of an enslaved woman who was forced to work in the field on a farm on Maryland's eastern shore. Then in 1826, when he was about 8 years old, he, like his mother, had to give up his freedom and be enslaved by a fellow human being. Auld provided Douglass with harsh living conditions, and Auld became furious when he found out that his very own wife had been teaching the curious child how to read. We also discovered that Douglass was allowed on Sundays to attend a church located 3 blocks from our school's campus. But when the service ended, he had to return to Hugh Auld's house. One final connection between our school's location and Frederick Douglass's life can be found in the area of the present day Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Museum, owned and operated by Living Classrooms. Living Classrooms is also the operator of our charter school, and it is at the museum's location that Douglass toiled long hours as a caulker at the shipyards which used to be located at this site. He would receive some payment for his work, but we learned that he had to turn all of his money over to Hugo Hall. These are the reasons why we studied about Mr. Douglas, and Victoria will now share with you what we learned as a result of our research.
Thank you, Simeon. We learned that despite horrific obstacles, Douglas never gave up. For example, he continued to find ways to learn to read. He also kept his hope that he could one day be free and continuously work towards that goal. Our numerous visits to the Living Classrooms Museum honoring Mr. Douglas taught us that Frederick Douglass gained his freedom on September 3, 1838. One of the displays at the museum showed us how he was able to disguise himself as a free black man and board a train in Baltimore heading for New York. Despite several close calls and despite the fact that he could be killed for his actions, this brave man was finally able to reach New York and freedom. Finally, we learned that Frederick Douglass went on to achieve great things. He became an important leader in the abolitionist movement. He established and edited an important anti-slavery newspaper. He was a famous orator and he held several government offices. And he never forgot about others who had suffered the same injustice as he had. He returned to Baltimore once he was a prosperous, successful man and purchased the site where he once attended church. On the site, 524 South Dallas Street, Douglas developed rental houses for free blacks. Our class made a trip to the site, a short 3-block walk from our school. The homes are still there, sturdy, occupied, and well cared for. As we stood outside the properties with our clipboards and notes, we stopped and reflected on the remarkable life of Frederick Douglass and how fortunate we are to be able to share, in a small way, the legacy of Frederick Douglass. Thank you.
For those of you who are, let's give our young people another round of applause. Aren't they awesome? A famed museum administrator and antique collector, Joseph Beach Noble, said, "What do you call a person who draws, paints oil in tempera and watercolors, sculpts and writes books on anatomy and drawings, and does all of the above extraordinarily well? Surely a genius. Joseph Shepard must be the reincarnation of a Renaissance artist." Next, how do you define him? Well, no, certainly he is an interesting mix of the past and the present. If you take one part of Michelangelo and add an equal amount of Bernini, stir in a taste of Rubens, and season with March, Sloane, and Bellows, who you have is Joseph Shepard. He's well known, I would suspect, for 2 portraits of William Donald Schaefer, one as mayor and then as governor. He also is known for the Holocaust monument sculpture and the Brooks Robertson sculpture that many of you see at Camden Yards. In addition, he has created a very special sculpture in honor of Frederick Douglass on display right here. Please welcome Joseph Shepard.
You can believe all of that or not. That's not important. I just wanted to say a couple things about Frederick Douglass. It seems not strange, but 2 of the African Americans that were slaves were the biggest heroes of that time. Both come from Maryland. Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. You can compare Douglass, I guess, to Martin Luther King. You know most of this story. His slave owner's wife taught him how to read. That was against the law. But he did learn, and he actually educated himself. One of the quotes that I have here, and actually I try to portray in this statue, He says, once you learn to read, you are forever free. And so I had the young boy and Douglas with his books. There are a couple interesting things. I don't know if you know of John Brown. John Brown was probably America's first terrorist. He went into Kansas when Kansas was coming into a state, and they didn't know whether it was going to be a slave state or a free state. And he and his 7 sons went around and beheaded all the people that were for a slave state. Not all, but many. He had an idea to go to Harper's Ferry, where the national armaments were, and kill the soldiers there, take the guns and all, and send word to the South so that the slaves could rebel and come up the railroad, and he would arm them, and they would make a revolt. Douglas met him in Pennsylvania before he went to Harper's Ferry and brought money that abolitionists had given him to help Brown. But he refused to go with him because he didn't think violence was the way to go at that time. So John Brown went to Harper's Ferry. He got all the armaments. Unfortunately, no slaves came to pick them up. And U.S. Army came in and they hung him. And they said he was a traitor. Later, after the Civil War, Douglas went to Harper's Ferry and spoke about Brown. And he said Brown, even though he was hung, was really the first battle of the Civil War against slavery. So my statue, I thought I had a commission to do a monument of Frederick Douglass. So this was actually a model for a much larger piece. It didn't come through, but I liked the piece so much I made it into bronze. And it's been sitting in my studio looking for a place, a home. And I have to tell you a story about a man from Fells Point, who's dead now, a magician named Dantini. Dantini used to work in the bookshop on Charles Street, and he'd do magic tricks. And his quote about a magic trick was, "Do you know how long it took me to learn this magic trick?" Then everybody said, "I don't know." He says, "A half an hour, but it's taken me 3 years to find a place to show it." It's taken me 3 years to find a place to put Frederick. So anyway, I don't have much else to say. Oh, I do have to say, because another thing, everyone thinks that Obama was the first black American to run for president. That's not true. Frederick Douglass was on a ticket for vice president in 1857.
Thank you. Let me finally introduce someone who I've known for quite some time. She was a VP at WBAL Television, but she now runs the Reginald Lewis Museum here in Baltimore, our African American Museum of History and Culture, Ms. Wanda Draper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to the distinguished panelists here. It's a pleasure to be here. We're excited about celebrating in this wonderful kickoff that the mayor's launching for Black History Month. But I just need to say to Mr. Shepherd, I have a home for Frederick. I have a home for Frederick. We have 82,000 square feet, and Frederick is welcome. We're excited about all of the activities at the museum. We opened a new exhibit today called Reflections of Iconic African Americans. We also have a second part of that exhibit, Reflections on Baltimore. So we do hope you'll come and see that exhibit. Tonight we are premiering the Smithsonian film, The Lost Tapes of Malcolm X, and there's a whole series of events that are going on at the museum. And we really are particularly interested in the young people coming Crossroads, because like Frederick Douglass says, it's much easier to build strong children than it is to repair damaged men and women. So we do hope you'll come. If you go to our website, lewismuseum.org, you can see we have activities all month. But most of all, the Reginald F. Lewis Museum is your source for African American history all year long. Thank you.
So as we prepare to cut our cake, I wanted to remind folks that we'll be celebrating Frederick Douglass all year long and Black History Month. Where's Carmelita? Step out here for a minute, Carmelita. The brochure that you have in your hand was designed by Carmelita, who works for us in the mayor's office. We have so much talent in our city, just so much talent. Give her a big round of applause. Thank you, Carmelita. And finally, let me just remind you all that this is also Friday begins the Black Restaurant Challenge kickoff. So please, it's spearheaded by Casey Jenkins. The Black Restaurant Challenge encourages residents to spend a little money in our black restaurants throughout the city of Baltimore. And again, we're excited about celebrating Black History Month. And as the president said, it really is an all-year celebration. But this is a time that we really place a lot of focus. And so there's lots to learn, there's lots to see, and there's certainly lots to hear. And so we hope that you will join us this evening at 6 p.m. when we open up our exhibit. Everyone is invited. And so now I think it's time to cut the cake.